Dr. David Reid, Nottingham Trent University. I teach photography, particularly critical practice in photography. But I'm particularly interested in this camera here as an object made by the photographer from Prague, Tichy. So he made this camera out of toilet rolls. But what he did with this camera is he used this camera to take photographs of women, really, young women, like in a sort of geeky sort of way. And in a sense, he produces beautiful photographs, but that whole idea of objectifying anybody, you know, whether it's the body of women or any person, is a problem for contemporary photography. It has been since, you know, the past 40 or 50 years, the objectification of somebody through the camera. So I think, as we were talking before earlier, the camera can distance us from the world. You know, we can't touch with the eye, we can only look. The gaze is a distant thing. So the gaze objectifies, the male gaze. We've had lots of critical discussion about that. But there may be other ways of a soft sort of gaze that we need to do through the camera. So an addressing of the world, addressing of the objects of the world, whether they be people or objects themselves, in a sort of respectful way, was something that came up in a talk here today. Maybe we can think about addressability in a gentle sort of way, through a gentle gaze at the world, rather than the way Tichy used his camera. That's something that's a responsibility of the photographer to address themselves. So there's two images here. This image by Jacob Moore, spelled M-O-H-R. I really like this image because this figure here has got sort of black box, and that could be a camera or it could be sound recording equipment, but it's like it's projecting the world. For me, it seems to be going in two ways. That, you know, there's a person posing for a portrait here, or so it's like all these waves and force fields, lines of force, lines of attraction, lines of projection going between the camera and the object in the world. So the whole world is full of force fields between things. So that, you know, the relationship between objects and cameras, recording devices, I think is a fascinating world. You know, it's a very active, alive process, the recording process. And we think of so much of our world today is based on recording, you know, photographs, audio recordings. That's how we engage with a good deal of the world. Most of our knowledge comes through some sort of recording device, which maybe take us back to earlier to think about the distance again. It distances from the world in one way, but brings us closer to the world in another way. You know, if we have an object of something like Tichy, for instance, has an object of his young women, he can touch, you know, he can do what he wants with it, really. So it brings objects closer, even though it gives us a reduced version of the person. It brings that person as an object, as a extraction from the world, closer to the person who made the image. And we might see this here in Pygmalion and Galatea. There's this transformation of an inanimate object into a product of desire, which in this object here, this illustration here, we might see as the statue itself has a sort of indifference to the male gaze, maybe, or maybe she's just portrayed as that downcast eyes gaze of the way women are supposed to look. But it's very much about a fantasy. So maybe it takes us back to Tichy again, and we could think about these two images, men projecting fantasy onto women as objects. That's that sort of thing. All that sort of action going on there is all a projection in action, pictured.